Not the kind of guy to stand up and do a presentation and have a PowerPoint slideshow for you. So instead, we're just going to have a chat. And he's going to tell you about his early time in Manhattan Beach. So Glenn, may I call you Glenn, sir? Yeah, anyway, I feel like a kid at this point.
You are.
Yes, I am, yes, thank you. When were you born, if I may ask?
November 26, 1920.
And can everybody hear him?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure, we do have a mic here, we're just,
Do you mind holding? Do you want to hold it, or should I can put it up?
on the Jack Benny show now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, so you were born in 1920? And where were you born?
My folks were living in Redondo Beach, and I was born, I think, in a hospital in Torrance.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think everybody's born in a hospital in Torrance nowadays. And so how long did you live in, oh, no, let me ask you about your parents. Where did your parents come from?
My mother was born in Scotland, my father was born in England, and being good British subjects, they immigrated to Canada. And then from Canada, they came down to Redondo Beach, and then from Redondo Beach to Manhattan.
Okay. But you were born in
They were
Redondo
living-
Beach or Torrance.
They were living in a little house on Burl Street in Redondo Beach when I was born. And they moved to Manhattan Beach in 1922. So that's when I
Okay.
arrived in Manhattan in 1922.
Okay, so you don't remember a lot about those first 2 years, obviously. So you basically were born and raised, you were raised right here in Manhattan Beach.
Right.
Okay. So can you tell me a little bit about what you remember from your childhood? What do you?
My first recollection is 805 9th Street.
Was that where you lived?
Yeah, that was, we lived there for quite a while. I went to Center Street School,
Uh-huh.
and Center Street School at Redondo High.
Now, you showed me a picture earlier, and we didn't. I just got it, so it's not scanned to put up on screen for you. But you graduated from Center Street in
34.
1934, and he's told me that if anybody needs a copy of the photograph, that you're welcome to have a copy of the photograph.
It's a school picture.
All the cute kids from 1950, when we were still cute kids, right? And then you went to Redondo,
Yeah,
and so you were class of
38.
38. So what did you do for fun when you were a kid?
Went to the beach.
That makes sense.
I couldn't understand people would go to the mountains or a lake or something. I just couldn't understand it when the beach was right down here. It was my life.
Now, I'm not really familiar with surfing and paddleboard history a great deal, but was that up and going when you were a very young man, when you were a boy, or did that sort of get a little bigger a little later?
Paddleboards didn't come in, I don't really recall. But when I was a kid, no, there was no, it was all body surfing.
Body surfing.
Yeah. Then the boards came in.
But you eventually got involved with a surfing group, did you not?
No, I never had a board. First there were the paddle boards that they made, and then there were the long boards, and Hermosa started building boards.
Okay.
And, no, I was never I was just body surfing.
So tell me, you mentioned to me in an earlier conversation the water rats.
Yes.
So tell me about the water rats.
Well,
What were the water rats?
They were the older group. I was about just a kid, and there was a bunch of kids, they just lay in a circle, on the left side of the pier. And one of the village merchants said, "Oh, you guys are just a bunch of water rats." So they took that as a name and they formed a club. And they just hung out, and when Mayor Blech, B-L-E-C-H, was running for office, he gave the water rats a bunch of pamphlets to hand out. Well, some of them changed to B-E-L-C-H, Mayor Belch. And that kind of put an end to that.
No boy.
That was it. They were just 18, 19, just high school and out of high school. I was still in grammar school at the time. My mother thought they were a great bunch of kids.
I'm sure they're all sterling,
Well, a lot of
as
them.
all kids are.
Joe and Hugh Reynolds were in the police force, and Len and Jean Flanagan and Bob Wiley worked for the post office, and Chuck Schmidt was a lineman for the telephone company. Yeah, they were a good bunch of guys.
Sure. And you described yourself once to me as their mascot.
Yes, yeah, I was the mascot. And that was in the days when they had one-piece suits. But I was so small that the Manhattan Beach Water Rats, they had a stencil, but it was too big for my suit. I was bent out of shape about that, but there wasn't anything I could do. They used to, then the little kids didn't have to wear a top. So sometimes they'd take the picnic benches and turn them upside down, and take their suits down when the cops weren't looking. And there was one incident where this woman just took her top down and was sitting there. And they sent the policeman down to tell her to put up her top. She said, "What's the matter? Haven't you ever seen anything like this before?" He said, "Yes, but they were on a cow." She put her top up.
No kids in the audience, right? That's funny. Now, but you also told me about some other shenanigans you were up to.
Oh, we were all about 13, 14. And somebody said, "You know, what you want to do is Highland and Center Street, you put a berm." What's a berm? Well, this is just a row of sand here. Then you go back a block and do the same thing. You pour gasoline on them. And when the cars come down, you light this one. When the cars come up, you light this one. Well, that sounded pretty exciting to a bunch of kids, but first we had no way to get the sand, and we had no way to get the gasoline, and we were discussing it. And the fellow that told us about it went back and told the police. So we turned around, and there were the cops. Well, we ran, but the cops ran us down. Took us to jail and put us in this. And who was the desk sergeant on duty but my brother? Well, he put us all in one cell, and I was like monkeys in a cage. So they called this guy that hung around town, Jack Thompson. At the time where the Chase building is now was a hotel. And Gene Dorman's dad had the hotel. So they took us down and set us in the hotel room and kept us till about 12:30 or 1 o'clock, late enough to where we'd all get trouble when we got home.
Now, your brother was the desk sergeant, you said.
Yes.
Now, I see him often listed as EC Patmore.
Yes.
What was his first name? Was it Ed? Was it Ed?
Edward Clare,
And did he go by Ed, or did everybody just call him EC all the time?
EC.
Call him EC. That's interesting. Okay. He apparently was involved in a lot of business in town. Besides being a police officer, I guess.
Later on, he was fire chief.
Wow, his fire chief. I also see him listed as the proprietor of the bathhouse.
Yeah, he had the bathhouse for a while. My mother was the locker girl on the women's side, and my other brother was the locker boy on the men's side.
There you go.
And,
Did you guys rent those suits you were talking about with the stencils? on?
yeah, they would rent you'd get a locker and a towel and a bathing suit, and you could rent an umbrella. In those days, the stem of the umbrella was solid oak, and the umbrella was a heavy canvas.
Mhm.
And although there was a deposit, some people would just leave it. And it was my duty to go out and drag. I could drag two, but that was it. I dragged them back to the bathhouse.
And I guess he also then eventually got involved in real estate because, of course, the building that we're doing, and a plumber as well, I think.
Yeah, the Drake Plumbing bought out Patmore Plumbing.
Ah,
You remember Wilmer Drake
of course,
and
yes.
his family?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's interesting that back in the day, because the town was small, people wore many hats. Now, what did you end up doing for a living, if I may ask?
Well, being a little kid, there wasn't much to do, just wash dishes in restaurants and,
No, I meant when you got older, though.
how do you mean?
When you, well, okay, so you graduated from high school, and then
Oh.
apparently you went into the Navy. Is that correct?
Oh, in May of 41.
In May of 41. Okay.
No, 42.
May of 42.
Yeah.
What did you do for a living after you got out of high school?
Well, I went to Frank Williams Trade School to learn to be an auto mechanic, and I worked for Standard Brands. They recruited us out of Frank Williams Trade School, and it turned out all they wanted was somebody to park the trucks, first in, first out. So all over the neighborhood, and I thought I didn't go to school to park trucks. So I went to Howard Buick, and the war broke out, and the gasoline didn't have a high enough octane. So we had to pull the heads, put it in a thicker gasket, and drill out and that's when I enlisted, May of 42,
May of 42. And you went in the Navy.
in the Navy.
And where did you serve?
The Central Pacific.
So,
Well, I was 3.5 years in the Navy, but I was never stationed aboard ship.
there's some advantages to that. You know?
Well, I don't know, when I got out of boot camp, they said you're going to be in a cashew unit. And I said, what's cashew? It's a carrier aircraft service unit. Well, I was delighted. My eyesight wasn't good enough to fly or be a gunner, but I would be around airplanes. So on the dashing wave, we left from Point Wainimi, and they dumped us off on a little island not much bigger than this room, and I said, what happened to cashew? And the OD said, well, it's still cashew, but now it's Combat Aircraft Service Unit. So we serviced these fighter planes and the bomber stuff.
I see. And once you got out of the service, what did you do for a living? You weren't a real estate agent, a plumber, and so forth, right?
No, I went to work for Human Brothers Lumberyard in Manhattan Beach, and they had a shuttle, Northwest 80D, and I had to join the union, and then we worked around Long Beach on the freeway, and then I went up to Bishop, met that young lady there. We've been married 64 years.
Wow.
And, then I came back, and he worked out of the Union Hall. Well, I was off for about 3 weeks complaining, and the guy said, well, if you were smart, you'd take the I forget his name, the dispatcher could pour a good booze. And I, well, nuts to the dispatcher. Then I went onto the automotive end of it.
I see. Now, you introduced your wife briefly. This is Kit? You go by Kit, right? I want to make sure about that. And where did you get married?
Manhattan Community Church.
At Manhattan Community Church.
Manhattan Beach Committee here at 9th and Highland.
Gotcha, okay. And, which is where it was at the time, yes,
Yeah, 9th and Highland.
at 9th and Highland. And you eventually then moved out of Manhattan Beach? Into, all the way over to like just across the street into, barely into Redondo?
Yes, yes.
I wanted to ask you, because we do have another speaker. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the pictures. We have, you gave me 5 pictures or so to scan. Remind me to give those back to you. I haven't today. So we have these 3 young men. I'm sort of amused by their baggy pants. This must be 30s, probably, between the late 20s, early 30s, somewhere in that range.
No, it's at the Center Street School. Buster Jensen, Al Urkel, and Bob Kiles.
That's Al Urkel in the middle, as you said?
I can't see that far, but I think
Okay, that's what your recollection is? Okay. Yeah, let's go to the next one. So, of course,
Water rats.
not really sure what's going on here, but kids having a good time. Let's go to next shot. Now, you mentioned that your brother, your parents originally went to Canada, so your brother was born in Canada, is that correct?
Well, I'm the product of my father's second marriage.
Gotcha. Okay.
E.C. Patmore was his first marriage.
So EC served in the 54th, I've forgotten what that stands for, that's at the name of a town, battalion of the Canadian Expeditionary Forces. And they did a bunch of stuff overseas too. And go to the next shot if we can. And I'm sorry, which one is your brother?
I can't.
It's kind of tough to see, yeah, especially at this angle. So he was in the Canadian Armed Forces during
Yes.
the Great War. And one more shot. And so he got a little older, and that's pretty much a 20s shot there with that mid-tie cut off at the bottom there.
Well, I understand that's at my father's grave.
Ah.
That's E.C. Patmore, the picture.
My father died when I was about 3 years old, so
Gotcha, okay. But that's EC, right? Yeah. I think that covers all the questions that I had for you. Is there anything, is there a story that I've left out that you'd like to talk about?
you asked what I did, and just a little kid washing dishes was about it. I washed dishes in half the restaurants, and there used to be a group called the Manhattan Beach Community Players.
Okay.
And they practiced and produced at the auditorium in the Center Street School. And I would run errands for them and this, that, and the other. And he said, "Kid, you want to make some money on the weekend?" I said, "Sure." And they knew this lady that would have a dinner party on Friday night. Saturday, she'd have a stack of dishes. So I went there, and she'd give me 35 cents if I'd do all these dishes. Well, one time I was down there, and about halfway through, she went over the trash can and stepped on the lid and had this pastry in her hand. And she said, "I'm going to throw this away, or do you want it?" And I looked at it, and in those days, it's what you call store-bought.
Mm.
And I said, "Well, if you're going to throw it away," she said, "I am, unless you want it." So I took it. And it was first cousin to a hockey puck. I don't know how old it was, but I gnawed my way through it. You know, it came time to pay me, she gave me just a quarter.
Oh.
And I said, "You know, you're dime light." She said, "Well, that's for the pastry you ate." And I said, "Well, you were going to throw it away." but you ate it. You were gonna throw it away, but you ate it. So I went home, and to digress a little bit, I loved potato chips in those days. But my mother would never buy them because she said, I can buy a small sack of potatoes for the price of a bag of potato chips. So when I handed her the quarter, she got this kind of smile on her face because she thought I'd bought a bag of potato chips, and I told her what had happened. I said, do I have to go back? And she, absolutely not. You didn't ever have to go in the first place, but I felt like I wanted to contribute. So I never went back. But,
I have a question.
Question over here.
What, you were at Redondo Union High School?
You were at Redondo.
Union
Yes,
High School.
Yes, he was.
What years were you there? What years did you attend Redondo Union?
So he got out of center school in '34 and graduated from Redondo, I'm sorry, from,
Redondo Union High.
yeah, from Redondo in '38.
June of '38.
So you may have known some of our family, the Greek girls, Molly, Louise, Dina, or Sophia Vengel, or Vagelatos.
Did you know the Vengels?
Oh, yeah.
You did?
Oh,
We're
yeah.
here. I want to add, 25 cents back then was a lot of money.
Can you, one more time your names?
I'm Dimitra, this is Angela, but the family name was Vagelatos, but it was shortened to Vengel. So the Vengel girls, Dina Vengel was my mother.
Dina Vengel was
Oh,
But
her
you went to
mother.
school with Louise Vengel.
And you went to school
Well, I
with Louise.
knew Jerry Bengal in high school.
That's her dad.
She
Be
said,
She
nice.
said Jerry Vengel was her father.
oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Any good stories about
No,
Jerry?
no, no. Things out the slideshow.
Yeah, he broke 2 of my ribs.
Yeah.
I was walking down the hall and I dropped my pencil and I bent over to pick it up and he kicked the door open and the doorknob hit me.
Then we're not going to ask you if you knew George.
Did you know George?
He was a football star.
Oh, yeah.
Football player.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, just leave it at that.
Well, yes.
Yeah. We grew up together. He was my neighbor. He's my brother's age. And he was my little boy that was down the street. Do you remember growing up with me? Anita Stichter.
Anita Stichter.
Do you remember Anita Stichter?
Here I am, Anita.
Oh, yes.
So there was a while
Oh,
ago.
yeah.
Yeah, here I am. You know.
We were in high school.
We're done with the stories now.
I was older than he was, so I was always telling him he was my brother's age. And I was always bossing the younger boys, the 2 boys around. But anyway, he was between my brother and me. My brother was younger and he was in between and I was older.
And Anita, he was Water Rats, and what was the name of the girls group?
Peppy Steppers.
Peppy Steppers. Did you know?
Oh, yeah.
Remember me?
Yes.
Okay. Can't forget.
We have one more question in the back.
I just want to know, you are 97 years old, right? What is your secret to be so young
What is
and
your
so
what is your secret to be
sharp-minded?
so young and sharp-minded at 97?
Just keep breathing.
He says, and a little shooter once in a while. I'm going to let him take a little break, and we're going to have our, in fact, I think we should all take just a little break for a second, and then we'll have the ladies up to talk about their Greek ancestors that were here in Manhattan Beach back in the early days. Can I have a round of applause?
Yes, thanks, Glenn.